My father came from a relatively well-to-do family. There's an old term, farmer warrior, and his father ran a sake brewery. He manufactured sake, which entailed having a lot of land. So he had a lot of rice land, and he was the the third son. And of course, being the third son, you don't inherit the land or anything else. But he went to Saga High School, which was a very prestigious high school, and he attended. He took the naval test because most of the students from Saga usually went into the military or into the government. And he didn't want to go into the military. He was more of a pacifist. He studied American history, Constitution, and he got enamored. He started to show a lot of interest in America. So I guess his parents, they were against it. His friends were against it. They said, "Well, no, why don't you just stay here?" And everybody, says, "Hey, you're going to the military." I mean, that's quite an honor. Everybody was excited about it, but he says no.
So this is interesting. So in high school, he studied U.S. history.
U.S. history, Constitution, government,
democracy.
Also the parliamentary government in England.
In addition, he took this test to go into the naval school, did really well, was accepted to this prestigious naval academy.
Academy, yes. In fact, his friend, several of his friends, they went to the Naval Academy, and they were successful. But then they ended up as being admiral. And later on, what happened is that one of the admirals, Matsunagi, he came on what they call where the naval ship was sailed around the world, and this was before the war, and he came over. I met him, and he was an admiral, and my father was just a school teacher.
That's impressive. So he was like at a prestigious school, did really well. It's almost like the elite class in some ways, isn't it? It's like the best and brightest that would go to
best and brightest, but of course. Saga Prefecture as a prefecture is not not like Tokyo or Osaka or not. It's in the country. But yes, from a standpoint of producing more military officers, general officers, or having people in position in the government, Saga produces its share, a large share.
Okay, so he decided at this point that he was interested in coming to America.
Yes.
And your parents or your grandparents didn't want that to happen.
They didn't want it to happen.
And so he was pretty headstrong, pretty willful in terms of...
Definitely headstrong. I would say once he made up his mind, he usually stuck with it. Yeah. And that's evident in a lot of things that he did.
Did he have contacts in the United States to come to?
Not really, except my uncle. This is his older brother was here. Tokutaro was farming in Atwater. However, he had a Caucasian sponsor, and he sponsored and to come to America to go to school. He wanted to go to school. He wanted to attend a college in the United States. However, he spoke very little English. So as a result, he was about 18. He went to grammar school and quickly finished grammar school, and then went to high school, and got enough confidence that he could go to college, and applied to UC. I keep saying UC Davis, but the farm school and.
So the agriculture college that became UC Davis.
Yeah, it's in agriculture college.
So he must have made it in before the cutoff, 1924. Was the cutoff of immigration. So he must have come here before that.
Yeah, he came before that time. Yeah, because he graduated college in 1918.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, and he finished in 3 years. So he did very well.
So that is because as having English as a second language, he was able to graduate from high school and then college in 3 years.
Yes, in 3 years. He met his requirements and he graduated.
Did he ever tell you how he learned English so quickly?
Yep, he sure did. Because when I had to learn Japanese, he says, look, he says, read as much as you can, listen to the radio, and talk to people who speak nothing but English. And so he lived with a Caucasian family. He had to speak English because that's the only way he could communicate with them. But he says, and he says, practice and study hard. He says it'll come.
Oh, so that's funny. So when you had to really go to Japan, he said the opposite. Listen to Japanese radio, read as much.
That's right. He says study hard, practice, learn, listen, and talk to people who speak nothing but Japanese. So he just reversed it. He says it worked for him, it worked for me. Well, for all of us, really.
Now that your father was a college graduate, at some point he met your mother.
Yes.
So how did the two of them meet?
All right, what happened is that at that time they had what they called the Yamato Colony. It was a newspaper publisher. And he bought land, this actually desolate land in the valley, in the Merced area, Livingston to be exact. And he bought acreage, and then he subplotted into 20 to 40 acres and sold it to Niseis with the intention says, hey, you people, if you're going to come to Japan, settle, become a part of America, and get married, have children. And so he was aware of the Yamato Colony. I mean, because UC Davis is, Davis is not very far from Livingston. And there was a huge community there, so he was aware, and he got a job with a Kinoshita family, and helped them develop their land. And at the same time, he got a part-time job as a manager of the Cortez Farming Association. And during that period of time, of course, my grandfather was farming in Cortez. And so,
so your grandfather followed
his mother's.
Your mother's father. Okay, got it.
My mother's father. He was farming, and then through, contact, mutual contact, they had what they call it intermediate, and introduced them, and that's how they met. So it was all the traditional Japanese style. You know a family, they know a family, and you get somebody that knows both families, and then you get the two together, and that's it. And so they decided to get married.
And about what year? Do you know what year that was?
About 27, maybe.
Okay, 27. Because shortly after that, then they had Tosh.
Yeah, so it should be 26, just to get the years straight. No, it was 26. They got married, and then they went on a honeymoon to Japan. And when they got to Japan, of course, they had a big ceremony and everything else, and they welcomed her. And then he got sick. I don't know what it was, but he got sick, so he had to prolong his stay in Japan. But after that, they returned, and they went to Atwater.
Well, before we do that, while he was in Japan, I think I recall he received a wedding gift.
Yeah, he received a wedding gift from his father. That's a few acres and a house. But he turned it over to his brother, who then leased it out as a tenant farmer.
I'm curious, was that a way to entice him to perhaps come back to Japan?
Yeah, that was one of the reasons. And maybe that was his, in the way when we were ready to go to voluntary repatriation, he says, I have this land, and he says, I think this land could support us. So yeah, I think he had that in mind.
Okay. And so then he came back to Atwater, you said?
Yeah, came back to Atwater and helped his brother farm. And what it is that his wife got ill, because his wife was still in Japan, and he wanted to go back to take care of her, so he turned the farm over to my father. And that's when my brother Tosh was born.
Okay, and then shortly after you came in 1929.
Yeah, and then what happened is that he had the farm in Lee Grand, and he was helping his brother out on his farm. He couldn't handle both. He didn't have enough money, so as a result, he decided, hey, he'll withdraw the lease on that land and then go to Lee Grand farm on a permanent basis, on a full-time basis.
And that's where you were born, Lee Grand?
Yeah, full-time basis. And then at part-time, during the busy season, he was managing the Cortez Farmers Association. So he sort of part-time. And then also he was taught a little bit of Japanese while he was in that for to supplement his wages.
But you mentioned earlier how, although he was doing pretty well, at one point it got really hard and he lost
Yes.
his money. At that point, what happened?
Well, he lost his money, sold up everything to pay off his debt. We went to our grandfather's place temporarily, and then it was a decision time as to what he wanted to do. And he loved teaching, and he was teaching part-time at Atwater. So when he saw this ad from Mount Eden for a school teacher, he sort of jumped at it and says, hey, this is great. So he took the job.
Oh, good. And so this is Mount Eden. This is probably where some of your earliest childhood memories probably take place.
Yes, we moved to Mount Eden in 1934, and I grew up there.
So what was Mount Eden like for you? What was that like?
A nice, quiet, small, very small town. And they had a Japanese community, maybe about 300 families scattered throughout there. The farm and the town consisted of mostly Germans. In fact, at one time they called it Germantown. And then nearby, they had a place where, memory slipping. Another race of people, and they.
Was it not Polish? No, it was
not Polish. Come on, some
I
Scandinavian. I could go by my right now. I have a senior moment.
That's okay.
I blank. I don't know why.
Well, going back to just some of your early memories of Mount Eden, just growing up there. Do you recall any stories of what it was like growing up as a child?
Oh yeah. It was fun time. We were poor. School teachers weren't paid that much. I think about $1 per student. The farmers were poor.
That's $1 per year or $1 per
month?
Per month, okay.
$1 per month, and that's not much money. And but anyhow, we as poor as we were, we still had fun. We played marbles, mumble pegs, played with rolling the tires and the tire rims, and making rubber guns and playing cowboys and Indians, and it was a good time, and of course we had our this Japanese school was there. They had the Japanese activities like the festivals. All the Japanese came, and all the kids they played, and we did things together, and it was pretty nice.
It's my memory that back then, that most of the farming types, that came from Japan, maintained a certain village solidarity. I mean, there was a lot of helping each other out.
Yes.
I remember that,
Yeah.
and I heard stories of where they would go as a group to help somebody plant something or harvest something, and it was.
They helped each other out.
Yeah.
Like my father, being majored in agriculture, whenever they had any problems with growing certain things or how to grow or do things, he would go out there and help. Likewise, the leaders of the community, whenever there's problems, when a death in the family, or they didn't have enough money to improve their farms and whatnot, they sort of pooled their money together. It was a community. It was a good community, and the community stuck together. We had our annual picnics. We had our kinjikai, the prefecture type, picnics. We all went out. The Fukuoka people went out, had theirs. The Saga people had theirs, and so, there was camaraderie. And not only that, I think that the community not only helped but also controlled our activities. Like you do something wrong, Haji, don't cause shame on, and people, and if you went out alone and walking and something happened, they're always watching out for you. They're there, and they're there, and so it's not like today where you don't even allow your children to go out in the backyard. But then we roamed, and the community people, they knew you by name, and it was friendly. We thought it was great.
Was there extra pressure on you because your dad was the Japanese school teacher?
Yeah, extra pressure. Pressure that I should behave better than the rest. Pressures that I should speak Japanese, which I hated. And I should have learned more, but anyhow, I did. He was a disciplinarian. He wanted us to follow the Japanese culture, and as a result, I had to go that extra mile to be a model Japanese child, I guess. The same way for the rest of the family. Yeah, this pressure.
Yeah, your father was a college graduate. Was that unusual for the community to have someone?
At that time, yes. At that time.
As well
Very
as
small
his probably his English speaking abilities was probably better than average also.
That is another thing that was a plus. I mean, they relied on him for to deal with the public, the Caucasian public. When one is they had an application to fill, he'll go there and help them out and bring it. And he was a sewani, a helper. I think he spent all his time helping others rather than help his family. It seems he's always gone.
Now, how was that with for your mother? Because here you had a large family at this point.
True.
Once you talk about how many siblings did you have?
At that time, let me see, it was my brother Tosh, myself, Bits, Satsuki, and Tomas. There was 5 of us eventually before the war, because Junko was born into a lake. And we were small and young, and my mother had to take care of the family and at the same time supplement the teacher's income. So she went out and picked tomatoes, picked strawberries, picked tulips, anything that to help out, to supplement the income.
It sounds like it was a pretty hard life for your mother. Then.
I think so. Looking back, I mean, I don't know how she did it, really. To work, to take care of the family, clothes, keep up the house, and being the teacher's wife, and being able to speak English. The woman, they came and talked about their problems and things like that. So she had to do that also. So she was a very, very busy woman.
Yeah, that generation of Japanese American women, really had
she was
hard lives. I mean, in terms of work and
because she was one of the few Nisei who spoke Japanese as well as Japanese as well as English, and as a result, they just kind of relied on her. Those things that needed translation, or not in translation, but being able to interpret and make them understand certain things that they do in the American way.
That's good. When you're playing, you mentioned earlier that there were a lot of German families.
Yeah.
Did you play with German kids also?
At school? At school, yes. We intermixed. We played. We had friends, and we played baseball. We did everything together, and there was. We didn't feel any different, other than the German kids stayed with the German kids. the Japanese stayed with the Japanese community, after school. Because of course they follow their old country customs also. So, but then if we meet on the street or somewhere else, yeah, we'll go out and play. And so it was a friendly atmosphere.
Well, growing up, did you ever experience times when you felt like you were discriminated against or prejudiced?
Not discriminated as such, but at times felt awkward. Awkward in that, by then you're conscious that you're Japanese and you're different, and as a result, you sort of think that they sort of slighted you in a way, or looked at you, but not to the extent that I thought it was discriminatory. It's just a kid's feeling, I guess.
Well, how did you feel about being Japanese? I mean, growing up.
At that time, I thought nothing of it. I'm Japanese. I mean, like all my friends. I mean, we didn't feel any pressure of being anything else. Although, my father sort of pressured me, but no, we got along. Japanese, I felt American.
Okay, good.
I felt American. Went to school and
probably did very, very good in school. The pressure was on to do well. Yeah.
It's that pressure.
Yeah.
In fact, there's among our, my peers. I mean, their parents would tell them do good. My family's telling them, and the German family used to say, you're our German, So there was a lot of competition, but good, good competition. And we got along well. I was never bullied. Never, really got into any fights. Well, maybe stress, the normal arguments and things like that. But no.
Well, when you were a teenager, about 13, December 7th, 1941, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. Do you recall that day and what?
I sure do.
So why don't you tell me, describe that day for us.
That day, it was Sunday, so we went to church.
They were Christians also.
Yeah, my father was a Christian, by the way. He converted from a Buddhist to being a Christian. And by the way, the Yamada colony was basically Christian. They even had the Christian church and things like that.
What denomination? When you say Christian, was it like Methodist or Presbyterian?
Well, it was Presbyterian, but I think he was a Methodist because the people in that area were Methodists.
Okay.
But our only Christian church was a Presbyterian church. But we went, and I went every Sunday, got my little pin, and one of the great privileges is to go up there and ring the bell. And so the pastor says, okay, it's your turn. So Toshi and I, we just ran up there and swung and pulled that rope and made that darn thing, and that bell will ring and resound throughout the community, and great fun.
So this was the first thing, like Sunday morning.
That was Sunday, and then we came back from church, and my father was there, and he says, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. And that was the first indication that there was anything wrong. The second indication was, he says, he had a bunch of documents and things like that, and he says, help me burn them. So we spent, all day just burning things, and pictures, newspaper articles, anything that related to Japan, he burned them.
What were you thinking while this was happening?
What was I thinking? I says, we better hurry up and burn this thing. I mean, especially the stove will go out. At that particular time, I wasn't thinking of why Japan. Well, I'll back up. My father told me, told Toshi and I about the situation because he loved it. He had a map behind his office, and he had pins stuck there, and he would say, well, this is what is happening in Manchuria, or this is what's happening in China, and this is the oil embargo and things like that. That the United States and Britain is doing this, and the Japan is trying to expand and gain resources. And he explained that. In fact, there was a couple of occasions where he says, there might be some trouble between Japan and the United States. At that time, I just thought that it was something economical, nothing like a war. But then it's when he was burning things like that.
Well, going back to that, so he had this map and the pins. Again, how did he get all this information? Where was he getting this information?
He was an avid reader. He read newspapers and magazines. I mean, and he can listen to the shortwave radio. So he kept up with news. He loved it. I mean, that was kind of his life.
Now, he could do both English and Japanese. Did he get any news from the English sources
English
also?
sources, yeah. The San Francisco.
So things like the San Francisco
newspapers
Times
and the Japanese newspapers. And he read them. I think he read them to impress probably his friend Shibata, because Shibata will come over and then they'll talk about it and discuss the world situation. And so, he was interested in history.
I'm curious, did he ever comment on the differences between what the American papers are saying and the Japanese news sources?
No.
In terms of, was there any differences or anything?
No. He didn't discuss any news analysis or difference between. No, only, he just, at our age, I mean, he didn't go into any deep discussion. He just wanted us to understand. I guess as an educator, he just wanted, to keep us informed, keep us abreast. Probably he did that so that we could do better in school, to know what the world situation was about. But he briefly, gave us a sort of a rundown as to what's happening.
Okay, so going back to December 7th, so you're burning, these maps, these documents, these newspaper clippings. Anything else that you're destroying?
Well, he was destroying these things, and of course he says we don't want anything that would incriminate us as being, Japanese. And my mother, she had this kimono that she got, and she thought in her mind that maybe this will show friendship between, our relationship between her and Japan, because her relatives are there. So she reluctantly took her kimono and burned it. There was some, like the Japanese flag, a sword and the mirror, and the emperor's picture that was given to him, and some of the award that he was given by the Japanese government for good service to the American community, not to the Japanese government, for his good service, Japanese service to the community, and got recognized for that. And so what he did is he took that, and I guess he didn't want to destroy that, so he wrapped it up, grease paper and whatnot, and put it in a can and buried it behind the school, and says, "Now don't tell anybody about this." And I said, "Oh, okay, we won't tell anybody."
Yeah, I remember the burying thing too.
He buried it, and later on, many years later, I said, "Gee, I wonder if it's still there," out of curiosity, and I figured by then, hey, that would be some good memory. Something to remember by. I went there, and that history in Jackson was all, it was all demolished, destroyed to create the freeway, and so it was gone.
So it's probably all dug up, and there's concrete and everything.
Gone. Maybe some construction worker found it. I don't know, but anyhow, it was gone.
Well, that's too bad.
I know that later in the FBI files and such, these little things like your father getting awards for community service from the Japanese government, and say going to the Japanese battleships when they came to town, and I remember going to a battleship, and that kind of thing. But these things were noted as black marks against people.
I believe so, because of the fact that the Special Intelligence Division, or the FBI, the Naval, they were covertly conducting investigations of people that they suspect, and of course school teachers and community leaders were one of the suspects. So I'm sure that he was on the ABC list, as they called it, and I tried to find his intelligence file. I tried for years to locate it, but no record.
Yeah, but going back to the ABC list, because relatively shortly the FBI did come visit,
and they picked him up.
And so what you tell
not visit, they just forcibly came, picked him up, and took him away.
Yeah, were you at home when this happened?
No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't. My mother told me about it, but no, and they took him away. He was gone for a couple of days, and then he came back. And of course, later on, he told me what what some of the questions that he asked and what his response were. But they released him, and.
But before they released them, and when they came to your house, took him away. What were you thinking? Your mother thinking? What was it like at your house after they had taken your father?
Chaotic and worried because the head of the family is taken away from me for no reason at all. It came very quickly, very abruptly. Knock on the door, Sanaya Akasi here, boom, gone. And no goodbye, no nothing, just gone. And so we were worried and concerned about what's going to happen to him.
In Mount Eden, were there other men taken away also?
Not that I know of.
So your father, as sort of that person who was one of the community leaders, they really targeted.
I much targeted him. I wasn't aware of the Sugino wasn't, and the other people weren't. So I think they just targeted him because he was a community leader, and probably because of that, maybe that ship,
that kind of thing.
The military ship, probably, and being an admiral, coming there with these, sailors with starch white,
Oh, real spit and polish, yeah.
Spit and polish, talking about spit and polish, and sitting in front like that while they're, really militaristic, I'll tell you. But it was something to see, really. It had really impressed a young kid to hear a roll of sailors and an admiral there sitting drinking sake with my father. Yeah.
And this was more for a family visit, or is it for the school?
I think he came to visit the family. Visit my father. But then it ended up as a what do we call it? Semi-official, social kind of thing, because the leaders of the communities were there, and they had a big banquet for him. So I guess it was semi-official. After all, here's a Naval admiral coming to visit, small town like Mount Eden. If they went to San Francisco or Oakland or someplace else, that's something else. But he's coming to Mount Eden.
Well, that was because they were friends.
They went to school. They went to high school together.
Did you see any affection between the two of them?
Yes. Yeah. They're like long lost buddies. Yeah. And so they another thing is they talked in the Sakaben. At first, official, Japanese language, But then later on, as they started to talk the Saga, dialect, Yokabaten and all that. And so it was really, it was a real close, warm relationship. Yeah, I saw that, and I was impressed. And then not only that, he invited us to go to the ship. And we got first-class service. We went to his cabin, we went to the deck, and we went to a lot of places where the other people couldn't go. So it was a real great experience.
Well, it must have been exciting for you as a 13-year-old,
of
or
course.
12, 13-year-old.
Of course. VIP treatment on the ship. Yeah. The only largest thing I ever rode on before, on a ship was a little fishing boat. So it was very exciting.
Well, it's ironic because that friendship later on, again, was something that was held against him.
These are all noted, I know.
It must
my family did that too, So. But then it's interesting that they let your father go after a couple of days or so. That,
in fact,
why? Does he have any idea why they let him go?
In fact, he gave a long talk on our way to Topaz. It seemed like he was just, letting everything out. And you know, while he was talking, at the end, I felt that, oh boy, I mean, he's treating us as an adult, as an equal, because of the things that he was telling us. But he says, yeah, he was picked up, went to Oakland, they interrogated him, and they asked him a number of questions, such as how he felt about the war, what his feelings were, what the Issei's in the Japanese community would do, and you know, it was all positive. He says, you know, the Issei's, they are honest, hard-working, law-abiding citizens, and they're farmers, and he says, look, they're not going to turn against America. They love America. They came to America. The children are America. He says the Issei's will stand behind their children. If they went to the army, they will, you know, pray for their return, and support that effort. He says, I don't think that there will be any problem between among the Issei's. He says the Nisei's have been taught that to be loyal to America, and he says, I'm a Christian. He says, I'm interested in my people, not the community, and I do whatever necessary to help them out. Well, he must have told a good story, because they let him go.
Yeah, because he must have, because I was actually surprised that they let him go, because some of the other men with fewer connections to Japan were detained.
Yeah, I think he was lucky. I don't know, whoever heard his story, was more lenient than...
More lenient, or maybe they wanted to use him.
That's
I don't know what, but anyhow...
Probably a combination.
And maybe because he was a Christian. I don't know. But he said that they released him and let him go. And boy, we were just elated. Wow, here he is back. But he never told us why. He just says, oh,
Now, from your perspective, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, I think they closed school for a few days.
Yeah, for a few days. Yeah.
When school reopened, what was it like for you going back to school?
Horrible. I mean, here's the kids that are your friends. And you go there and say, hi, Bill, hi, Joe, and they're looking at you and says, you dirty Jap, you slant eye, why don't you go back where you belong? Very hostile, very antagonistic, and you try to come on, you're trying to hold back, and you wondered, why are they doing this? I didn't do anything. Japan's the one that attacked, not me. And so it was a very trying time. Got into a few fights, arguments, and they never associated with us anymore. They stayed behind, they're whispering, they're looking at us suspiciously. They never did that before. But in this case, it was a tremendous, 180 turnaround for one reason or another.
I've heard stories with other people about how in this situation, sometimes the bullies would pick on the smaller, the younger, the weaker people. Was that happening at your school also?
The class bully. He came over there and spit at me and says, like, take me on, And I got to a point I couldn't stand it anymore. And luckily I took a little bit of judo, and I gave him a good old pushing out and put him down and give him a chokehold and said, say uncle. And then, of course, the teacher came by, saw us, stopped the fight, took us to the principal. I says, oh my God, what am I going to do now? He says, I'm going to be in deep, deep problem, because, one thing about my father supported the school. And if the teacher said you were bad, you were bad. And you get scolding at school, and when you go back, you get the double punishment. I mean, so I said, oh my God, I'm going to really get it this time. And so, but the principal sort of says, oh, all right, go back to school. Like if nothing happened. So I go back to school, and and the kids all looking at me, and they didn't say anything. They just looked at me in their way. But my Japanese friends, my Nisei friends, there's a smile on their face. They didn't say anything, but you could see a smile on their face. And I kind of felt good about it. But when I went home, I said, oh my God. And I says, what happened? And I says, I got, well, I had, I said, what happened? Got in a fight. Why? They call me a jack. Oh, okay. You know, I didn't get that scolding, but
it's almost like he anticipated that there was going to be trouble, perhaps.
Well, whatever it was, I mean, he just didn't. I react the same way he normally did. He just says, "Good." So it was good.
Well, after a few months, it became clear that people would be leaving Mount Eden.
Yes.
And describe, sir, the life or the preparations to leave Mount Eden. What was that like?
It was a panic and chaos because, you know, all of a sudden, I mean, we anticipated because people in San Francisco and other places were being evacuated. So we knew it was a matter of time that our turn would come. And of course, they posted the public notice. 34 was ours and put it up there, and that we had to be evacuated within a week. And so, well, what are we going to do? Yeah, so we had to dispose our property, not what little property we had, a car and a washing machine, things like that, but getting prepared. And my father tried to help, you know, the others, try to explain why and try to explain what's going on. And so he spent a lot of time talking to the others. At the same time, my mother, you know, getting prepared, making duffel bags, and making sure that these are the things that we want, and these are the things that we're going to sell, and these maybe we could store at the Shibatas, because Shibata says, "Oh, you can store it their warehouse," and so that was the activity. And of course, as far as the Caucasian kids and like that, there was no interaction because we were just the community busy getting prepared.
Yeah, for 1 week. I mean,
well, 1 week, it's a short time.
Yeah.
Very short time.
I'd like to ask about your mother's family in Cressy.
Yes.
Cressy is near Merced or someplace in that area?
Cressy is near Livingston.
Livingston,
Yeah.
okay. Now, at that point, they were able to purchase the land in their children's name who were citizens.
In my brother's name, yes.
So that they had a acreage.
They had acreage. They had fruit acreage, and so they actually, luckily, they let had a friend take care of it, and luckily he took care of it.
Yeah.
So when they came back, they had a crop to sell, so they were very fortunate in that respect.
Yeah, because that's so rare. You know, I hear these stories, but here's one of them where they had a good Samaritan friend that literally kept the farm going for them.
Kept the farm going.
Yeah.
And of course, they all came back, and they had to build a house, make room for all of the people, all the sons, siblings, because it was a large family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, and they went, to an assembly center. My grandmother tried to not try, kind of, of course, forcefully urged my mother to join them. Says, "Why don't you join us, and then we can be together?" And my mother tried to get my father to go, but he said no. He says, "My place is here with the community." He says, "I want to help them out." Because he says they're going through a lot of turmoil, a lot of problems. So he didn't do that. And even Shibatas and the Hasiga House and whatnot that moved to Marysville, they wanted him to go too, but he said, "No, I'm going to stay here." So he was kind of committed, to the community, and also to the community, to the school.
Mm. So let's go back. So your mom had all the bags ready.
Oh, I had them all
You're
ready.
all packed. Yeah. So how'd you get to was it the bus depot or how?
They had a bus pickup or whatnot, but a friend of ours, the Kinoshtas, he was a Jewish man, and he, volunteered to pick us up on his flatbed truck, and to take our baggage and to haul us over to Hayward.
So this Jewish man who's a friend of the Kinoshtas, you said?
They worked for the Kinoshtas.
Worked for Kinoshtas.
Yeah, and my father knew him.
Okay.
The reason for it is that one of my brothers was adopted by the Kinoshtas, and they were friends from way back. And so they knew this Jewish man, and the Jewish man, volunteered to help to take our family. So we were like gypsies. We were like the old, the Oklahoma farmers, and stacked our baggage, and we went to, and gave us lunch. We got a bag of lunch, sandwiches and things like that. He gave it to us. And
the Jewish man gave you the lunch?
Yeah, gave us a bag for all of us. Mm-hmm. And then we bid farewell.
Why do you think he was so kind to do this? This is unusual.
Why was he so kind? Maybe because the Jewish people were so persecuted in Germany, and maybe he had compassion or sense what we were going through.
Well,
but for some reason he did.
There were lots of people who were helped by various neighbors or teachers, or I mean, it really didn't feel like the whole communities were turning against people. I mean, I remember that there were people who helped us, and lots of stories that I've heard where some people came by to say this is wrong, and things like that.
True.
So it really wasn't as though suddenly the whole white community, was totally hostile.
Well, not everybody was, but then again, here's it was a German community, and they were in the same shoe as we were, but yet there was no indication to help us. It was just this, in my memory, it was just this one Jewish man that helped us. And I've always remembered that. And I says, man, if I get a chance, I'm going to, thank him, and I look for him, but we don't know where he is.
Okay, so we just ended up where you're dropped off at the bus.
Yeah.
At that point, did you know where you were going to go?
Oh yeah, we knew we were going to Topaz. It says so.
Topaz or Tanforan?
Oh no, I'm sorry, Tanforan. We knew we were going to Tanforan. Okay. Tanforan, just across the bay.
Okay, so you knew it as the racetrack? You just knew
we knew it was just a racetrack. We knew it was there. So it wasn't nothing new. It was just, we're going to just cross the bay. And so we were there,
So what were your first impressions of Tanforan when you got there?
Well, before I go to that,
sure.
What happened when we got to Hayward? What happened that impressed me the most were these Christians, and they had this table, and they had refreshments, donuts and pastries and Coke, and coffee and milk and whatnot, and they set it all up for us to have, and I was impressed with that. I said, all of this hostility in Mount Eden, and then yet here we're ready to go, and these Christians are there, coming and talking to us and telling us, please, help yourself. I thought that was impressive.
Do you know, was it because they knew the Japanese it's Hayward, you said Hayward?
Hayward, yeah.
Or it was just their Christian belief that they decided?
I think it was, well, they knew the Japanese, yes. And then, of course, their Christian belief, And my father, really was impressed. He's, being a Christian, he was thanking them. Well, he was not that jovial, but whenever they came, he would talk to them and says, "Thank you." And we brought him coffee and he was pretty appreciative of that.
Well, so what was the mood of your father during this period?
Moody, sad. I think he just couldn't understand why it was happening. I mean, because this is in retrospect, I think, because he talked to the FBI, told them what he was going to do, and he helped the community, and yet, he's being evacuated. Sullen. He wasn't jovial like he normally was. Didn't talk much. So we saw the change of attitude on this part. And going back to your question, what my first impression of Tanforan was, a lot of Japanese, all centered in one place. The guards, the soldiers, you know, of course we had soldiers on the bus and the soldiers there, and then you look up and you see this barbed wire fence, and you get the feeling of being a prison, like, I mean, not being a prisoner before, but then being kind of incarcerated in one bunch where there was nothing but Japanese. That's my first impression. Of course, you know, I studied the Constitution and the history, bills of rights in school, and so I says, gee, you know, where's my rights? What's happening to me? As young as I was impressed that all of this was wrong. I couldn't understand why we had them. And the Germans, they didn't have to go. My father was saying, Jesus, the Germans didn't have to go. The Italians didn't have to go, but we were going. And so that's the kind of mood I was in. And of course we were busy, you know, moving things around, getting set in the barracks, filling our mattress full of straw and things like that. So the initial first 2 days was just busy getting ourselves set up. Later on, you know, you start thinking about it more and more as you get the feeling that, hey, you go to the mess hall to eat. You can't go outside. Of course, at that time, there were visitors coming and things like that, but the fact that you couldn't go outside anymore, this is it. So, and then later on, I would go up to the grandstand, look around, because, you know, you could see the whole city, you could see the airport. You're way out in the distance, you know that there's Mount Eden out there, and you start thinking, geez, well, you know, sure like to go back, because those were good times.
Yeah, so what kind of activities did your parents do to pass the time? You were there about 4 months.
My mother was busy, cleaning the house, taking care of the kids, all those things that mothers do. My father was goody for a while, but he got a job as a warden. And this warden allowed him to go and talk to people and see things and have a little interaction with the authorities, administration, see the JACLs, how they were conducting themselves, and he was pretty. He gained back his confidence, and he became a lot more jovial. He spent a lot of time practicing no. This is the old Japanese.
Can I go back to the warden? It's interesting to me. So, so he was Issei. He was given a warden. The warden was kind of a position as, in some ways, a go-between between the administration and the community.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the JCL and what they were doing, because they were the Niseis who also played a role as a go-between between the administration and the community. Did your father work with the JCL, or we said that he kind of knew what they were doing?
No.
What kind of interaction was going on?
Because Issei's authority was very, very limited. I mean, the JCL actually took over everything, and the Niseis took over, and the Isseis were kind of a secondary role. I think because he speaks English, and they gave him, and he gave him a little bit of a role to meet, to do things for the community. And that's his main things, to do things for people, and that seems to bring his spirit up. Directly contact with, not me personally observing, but he would say to me, you know, that it's too bad that the Niseis and the JCL have taken over the role that the Isseis held, and then sort of suppressed the Issei down to a minor secondary role. And you know, all they can do is get a job at the mess hall or other menial jobs, while the, you know, the clerical jobs and administrative jobs, things like that, were not available to them. Even in community activities, it was the Niseis that took over.
So that's interesting, because the Niseis at this point, the JCL leaders were probably in their 20s, their mid-20s.
20s, yes.
And here you had individuals like your father, who was closer to 40, college educated, bilingual, and he was put more into a subversive or supportive role.
Some of them were, a lot of them were his students, but you know, a lot of them, they went to college, and they're going to college, and then graduating college, they had no job. They were grocery clerks. They were, you know, they had menial roles. They didn't have any leadership position because you know, they say, you know, control the community. So as a result, it's just a complete reverse.
So right at, you know, so we went to assembly centers, it's really switched right there.
It's switched, and not only that, the administration backed the JCL.
Exactly, because it was really the administration, camp administration, that really caused this flip, because
caused the flip.
They would focus more towards the Niseis.
True, and you know, and that bothered him, because, you know, Niseis as a rule obeyed their father. You know, they looked up to the essays. And you know, and whatever the essay said, they went along with. But now, I guess, for the first time, now they're above. And then the essays, by rules, were not able to hold any official positions. So it was a reverse. That troubled him.
Yeah, it must have been very hard for your father, who was a very proud man.
Yeah, too proud sometimes. But you know, it disturbed him. But then he overcame it, and he felt pretty good about it. I mean, as the days go. But of course, now we were getting prepared to go relocate
to Topaz.
To Topaz.
Well, let's go there, because you're at Tanforan for about 4 months, and then you had to go to Topaz. And during the train ride from Tanforan to Topaz, you had you and your older brother had that conversation with your father. I want to go back to that and talk a little bit more about that. Like, what else? You know, you mentioned earlier how he talked about, you know, his conversation with the FBI when he was picked up. But he talked about other things also.
Oh yeah,
during
he
that.
talked about. He talked about what our situation. Well, he says we're going there. By the way, he was convinced by my mother to make an application to join my grandmother's, but the authority says it was too late. You people, you do it when you get to Topaz. So he was anticipating putting in his application and then putting it and going to Granada. He talked about that. He talked about the various options that he had, like we could go all out on our own, or we can go to my mother's sisters who lived in Chicago. We could go there, or we could go to Granada. And so he talked about the options and what we would do, but he says that no, we would not be in camp. He says, well, if we're in camp, he said, what we're going to do is lose a lot of initiative. We'll be complacent. We'll be, you know, we'll lose our own free will. And he says, freedom is too precious to sit in a camp. And so he was adamant about going outside.
So he was pretty aware that there were ways to, even though you're going to Topaz, that once you got there, there would be ways to leave Topaz and to get back into society.
Yes, because that's what the authority told him. He says, when you relocate, it's only temporary things, and once you get there, you can relocate outside to wherever you want. And that was the word that was given by the authority. That was the promise. He says, you people, that's what's going to happen to you.
And I think that was WRA policy, you know, which clashed with, say, the Army. And, you know, I mean, I see that as a big struggle there.
Yeah, because there was a switch between the Army authority and WRA authority at that time. But anyhow, he was adamant about going outside. And he talked about loyalty. He talked about Bushido. You know, and what he says, you are an American. He says, when you get older, you will fight for America. He says the Japanese will fight for Japan, Americans will fight for America, and he says I will support you, and I believe in democracy, and you know, and so we will, in our mind, Toshi and I in mind, is that we will go to Topaz temporarily. We'll go out, and then, you know, he says it's going to be hard. It's a lot of hardship. He said we don't have any money, we don't have any property. He says the only thing we have is our back and our hands. And he says we'll have to struggle, but he says, would you help? You know, he says, "Ganbarimashou." You know, so, you know, let's do it together. And we said, yeah, sure. At that time, we felt, gee, he's treating us as an adult. You know, he's never talked to us like that before, especially about his personal life or the family. But he was divulging all this to us, and my brother and I, we started to appreciate that. And he says, oh, this is great. So we were anticipating going outside.
Well, it sounds like a motivational, uplifting conversation that you had.
I think more soul release on his part to let us know how he felt, and then saying, "Okay, gang, let's get this. You know, let's get ready to prepare to go outside because we are not going to stay in a relocation here." He says the freedom is too important, and so that was his rally call.
Yeah, and after all, I mean, he had been led to believe that. Yes, that this was possible, and
yeah, that's what the authorities were telling him. I mean, all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So he took that, you know, to heart. He says that's what's going to happen. Yeah.
So with that feeling, you went to Topaz. What was Topaz like for you? What were your first impressions?
Topaz, first impression: desolate, dry, dusty. You know, it's an isolated area. We got to Delta, and the sergeant up there told us, okay, what's going to happen to the baggage. The bus picked us up, hot, dusty, and you know, that was my first impression of the area. Nothing, cactus, sagebrush, a little green in Delta, but other than that, there was nothing. And then we got into Topaz, the guard standing at the gate with the guns. And then interesting thing was that, you know, they had a makeshift band, and they said that, you know, California, the California song, but they were saying California, California, bakatare, 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 yo, you know, and we said yay, yeah, you know, and so.
So this was a band of
Boy Scouts,
Japanese.
Boy Scouts, yeah.
Okay.
The people that came ahead, went there ahead of us, and they welcomed us, and the buses going by, and they're just, and so.
And so they changed the words to say essentially California, stupid California, stupid California.
Yeah, stupid California, bakatari, bakatari, you know. Yeah. So we all stuck up there and said, yay, you know. But that was the first impression of camp.
Yeah. Well, that seemed like a healthy attitude, you know, just, you know, really realizing it's California.
I guess because we had a pretty positive attitude that we're not going to be here long. Yeah.
Now, things like when you're, because Topaz was set to be more of a permanent place for people. So things like school, did you go to school? What was school like? Because you were like about 8th grade at this point?
Yeah, we went to school, and you know, it was a little room like this with benches, up on a stove. You know, if you talk about accommodation, it was barely nothing, you know. No pencils, no papers. And there was old Mrs. Lyle, good old Mrs. And she was an excellent teacher. And I think she brought things to reality, you know. It says, hey, all this fancy stuff, you don't need it. He says, you know, concentrate on the book, the study. And we don't need the fancy things. All we need is the motivation to learn.
You know, they had many Caucasian teachers in those camps, and when you look back on it, you know, you wonder.
They were great people.
Yes, on the whole. And how did they recruit these people,
I
you know,
don't know
to
how
come
they
into
did
a
it,
place
but
like that? They came from back east?
they lived in the same barracks that we did. You know, they had a corner there for all the Caucasian employees. Maybe the quarters were a little better, but then the conditions were the same. And they were dedicated teachers. I mean, they really to leave places, you know, their old jobs, to come to Topaz to teach. So and when they taught, they were very, you know, firm, but they were serious. They wanted us to study, regardless of what the circumstances was to study. So that was highly motivational.
Yeah, these are serious things, because I think one of your teachers assigned you to be like a reporter.
Yeah.
To go out
go out there and collect information.
Collect information, interview people, find out what's going on, and write about it.
Yeah, and I interviewed the principal, Legrand Nobles, and he was a real good gentleman. And he says, "Oh, you're the class reporter. Okay, come on, I'm ready for an interview." And you know, he treated me pretty good. And I asked him a lot of questions, you know, pertaining to what's going to happen to the students and what our future was, and that in general, what is the, you know, the climate, and what is your thought about us being here and things like that. And he was very candid, frank, and you know, he says, it was encouraging too. He says, "Well, this is only a temporary, but he said, we'll have the school running, we'll have books, we'll have, you know, things will be better, and we won't disappoint you, and eventually you know, you can study here and then go out and you can continue your education." And I talked to him, and I talked to the gym coach, and I talked to the class president, the senior class president, and they were very positive, and nice interview. Found out that you know, that students were leaving, families were leaving, and that they were going to places like, you know, like Salt Lake. They were going to Chicago, New York. They were going to Denver. They were going to places, and they says that a lot of them are going to school and they're doing very well. And so it was a sort of a positive thing.
So this is what you thought was going to happen to you also?
Oh yeah, of course. That was it was in my, you know, I believed it. I thought about it. I knew we had to go. I said, I knew, you know, I've already made up my mind that it's going to be hard. That I'll have to work, help the family out. But you know, my father emphasized education. He said education is foremost. So I knew that I was going to go to school.
Well, I'm curious. Your father was such an avid reader of the news. How did he react when you were reporting? You were doing all these interviews.
Oh, you know, he was very proud. He says, "Oh, this is great." Now, of course, before the war, he was saying become a lawyer, but then he says, "Become a writer." He says, "Write about it. You know, write about the situation here. Let the people know." He says, "After the war," he says, "let the people know what happened to us." So, you know, he was pushing me. I think what he really wanted to do was be his recorder to spread the word. But anyway, he was very supportive. When it comes to education, that's one thing. He was very, very supportive.
Well, after about 6 months being at Topaz, a friend of the family, James Wakasa, was shot and killed by an MP sentry.
Yeah.
So this was about 6 months in. What was the effect on you and your father and the rest of the family?
Well, since we knew him, it was sort of a personal thing. And as far as my father was concerned, you know, they had in the boiler room, they used to drink together, and you know, he went to University of Wisconsin, so he's an educated man. They exchanged ideas, so they knew each other and knew each other's feeling. And so when he was killed, he took it hard, and of course he became one of the committee members to see what they could do about it so that it won't happen again. So, and as a result of that, they changed their policy about having guards having guns and having only their sidearms and things like that the guard needs. So he was instrumental in pushing that along. But yeah, it was, to him, I think it was a loss.
So this was about 6 months in, and you mentioned earlier how your father right away applied to be transferred.
Right.
6 months in, you still haven't been transferred. How?
Right.
What was going on? Why was it taking so long for things to
I
happen?
knew why later on. I mean, but at the time, you know, like everybody else, we waited in line, and the first thing is we got a lot of applications, and it takes a while. And my father was aware of the fact that, you know, they did some spot check, you know, to see whether there's anything in the background, things like that. So it was taking a little bit more time, and so he kind of accepted that at first. But as the time went, you know, they kept saying, "Oh, just a little bit longer, a little bit longer," and he started starts to change. You know, he says, "Hey, maybe our chances of going is not as good as we thought it was." But yet he kept his spirit up and told us, "It'll be soon. We'll be going to join Grandma." And then, of course, the no situation came about. For a while, it was temporary. People were not allowed to leave until the no situation was completed.
Well, so yeah, let me explain. So, what happened was the questionnaire came out.
Yeah.
And so what all essentially adults over 16, over 17 had to answer this, or was it 18?
There were several applications. The first, well, there was simultaneously, but the Army.
Right. So yeah, draft
This
eligible.
is for this, for the selected service, and within that thing was the two questions. You know, will you serve or will you swear allegiance? Okay, those 27, 28 wasn't matter for 17 and over to 34, draftable age, and that was what the thing in form was, because the objective was to screen out those are loyals and disloyals, and then have them volunteer for the all Nisei combat team.
Right, and they took that same questionnaire though, and they tried to modify it for others also.
At the same time, WRA came out with their own form, which had the same two set of questions. Okay, the same two questions, but now the WRA form was for men, you know, for the men, for the Niseis, undraftable age, and the Isseis. And then for the woman, they had a question that the 27 was, would you volunteer for the nursing corps or the women auxiliary, Army Auxiliary Corps, which pertained to the woman. So there was a big hassle, and what happened is, as a result of this questions, the government changed it. And they changed it to, would you obey the law of the United States? And you know, so what happened is that
was on question number 28. So rather than swearing allegiance to
which
to the
a lot of
emperor.
Isseis objected to. My father objected to it, and he supported the Isseis because the Isseis were saying, "Wait, we can't do this. If we do this, you know, what happens to us?" Says that means that, you know, we have no country.
There'll be individuals with no country.
And so as a result, you know, my father and many others, of course, you know, advocated the change. And says, change it so that it would be more acceptable to the Isseis.
You know, it's really ironic. The first two camps that were given the questionnaires were Tule Lake and Manzanar, and those are the two camps that had the most trouble with all this.
Yes,
then when they changed that, you know, question 28 for the rest of the camps, then, you know, it just calmed down, and you know, you have to make these distinctions, because if you single out Tule Lake as being the biggest troublemaking camp, they were the first to get these, and so
and they were given a lot of misinformation, such as you will be liable and criminally liable.
$20,000 fine and 10 years in jail for not
all of
answering
these.
these.
It's a different kind of a situation.
So that, you know, it's
That's
unfair to single out Tulu
that is true.
as being more, you know, troublemaking than anywhere else. You know, it was just an accident of order.
Yeah,
you know,
conflicting orders and different people presenting the different information to the residents.
So anyway.
So as this got settled down a little bit, your father eventually filled out the form.
Yeah,
How did he answer those two questions?
He answered, he says, the first question, 27, he says, because the Iseis were given this form that the females got. Well, anyhow, he did. And then it was said, would you serve as in a nursing guard? He said, thought that was nonsense, so he left it blank. And then as far as the by obeying the law, he says yes. So technically speaking, it was a yes, because he would have said yes to 27, would he serve? Because, you know, when he was going to school, he served with the, you know, he joined the ROTC, and he's telling us that we should serve, and he was telling us that, you know, what it is that Bushido meant that you will protect your family and your country. And he says, I came to America. I adopted America. America is my home. It is your home. And I will do whatever possible to defend my home and my family. And he could explain that. And he was obviously a yes, a very highly loyal yes for that matter. And so he blank yes. And of course a lot of the people in the block, they all, you know, agreed, because that was a reasonable question, and as a result, you know, our block had the highest rate of registration, for example, and highest rate of yes. So it was, and then like everything else, it was over.
But then later on, the news came out that they were going to segregate. They're going to form a segregation.
Exactly. And what it is that our application for transfer never came. And he was called in by the FBI to answer certain allegations that were made against him. And he suspected that there was the JACL, because some of the things that he was saying was contrary to JACL's feeling of, hey, let's get all these Niseis to volunteer. And he felt he was close to the key base. He was very close to the key base, and he felt that the key base were really discriminated and abused. He says a lot of these people, I don't say a lot, but many of the key base, they were drafted, they volunteered, they served in the army. This is prior to the war. And what happened is that Niseis, of course, they were, you know, the relatives, minor roles. Some of them, the guns were taken away and they were sent to a labor battalion. But the key base were discharged and thrown into the camp. And, you know, they said, hey, we were serving. And now they want to know what they were doing. And not only that, is that the people outside of our camp, what happened is that when they had the chance, the people in Santa Clara moved before the evacuation to nearby farms, and they were farming nearby. And they would come into the camps, and they would tell us their stories and what they do, and they were free to go wherever they want and being paid, you know, going wages, while they were being paid $16 a month, and they were never questioned. Their loyalty was never questioned. And they said, they pick us up, put us up, why do they question us? I said, we're just as loyal as those people. And that was his rationale, and the more he thought about it, I guess what he was saying is, you know, this is not right. You know, our rights are being abused.
And so you think because he was sort of talking like this, sort of, realizing that their rights were being abused, you think that there were people in the JCL who disagreed with him and perhaps informed or told the FBI about this?
Yes, because, of course, the informant is anonymous. But then when he went to these meetings and made these, protests and things like that, well, there was the JSC members that were against it because they wanted, they're the ones that wanted the Niseis to volunteer for the army because they're the one that suggested it. And they want the Niseis to show their loyalty and says, hey. So as he was protesting, but he was protesting more for the Issei because the Issei felt that if they were drafted or volunteered, that they lost their son. I mean, that's the Japanese way of thinking is you go, you serve, and you're gonna die. And these people, these Niseis, the young Niseis, were their oldest son. That means that, they couldn't speak English. And they're saying, if the son is serving in the army, what are we gonna do when we go out? And a lot of these things married, because they were working and there was no woman to marry. So as a result, they married late. So they had a lot of young children. And they said, well, these young children, well, how are we gonna? What are we gonna do? Our farmers taken, our property's taken. Where are we going? What are we gonna do? We have no skills. So as a result, my father was pretty sympathetic to that. And as far as the JCL people, they kind of says, hey, do what these people are saying. If you want to go out, say yes. And so he was trying to defend the Issei's concern, and he vocally said that in public meetings. And he suspected there was some JCL member or somebody that informed on it.
Which then led to this interview with an FBI in camp.
FBI, with the FBI to find out what he was doing.
And so after that, how was your father feeling about that? Was he getting more and more sort of
suspicious, and he started to think more, and says, his leave clearance, he knew by reading newspaper and whatnot, one of the qualifications is to weed these people out before you let them go. And he knew that troublemakers or people who had derogatory, unfavorable information on file were not going to be released. And he knew that the FBI had a file on. So, I mean, I think what he did is put two together and says, hey, they're not going to release me. And being proud as he was, he wanted his freedom. And that's one of the reasons why he came to the United States. Is freedom and Constitution and liberty, and so right. And so as a result, he started to lean towards, hey, maybe I am not going to be allowed to go outside. That was his change of feelings.
And so when the segregation issue came out?
When the segregation issue came out, as soon as he came out, he made up his mind. Because he got us together and he says, look, he says, I am holding you people and the family back. If I withdrew my name from the application, your chance of going to Grenada to join the family will be, you're going to be able to go. Your mother is a citizen, you people are all citizens, and you'll be able to go. But he says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to volunteer to go to Japan. He said, once I get to Japan and the war is over and whatnot, I'll come back. But he says, to provide freedom for you and freedom for me, the best thing for me to do is to volunteer to go to Japan, and you people go and join your mother's family. And my mother says, no. She says, no, if you're going, I'm going. We're all going. She was pretty stubborn about certain things. And one of the things she did not want to break up the family. She wanted to hang on and be close to the family. And so that's what happened.
Now tell me about your mother. So was she the type to stand up to your father on these other issues?
Normally not. No,
but this one was really important to her, to really, even though your father said, we should do this, she disagreed.
She disagreed. Normally, there were times, like putting in the application to go to Grenada. Yeah, she insisted on that. There were certain things that she held fast, but in normal cases, she would go along with my father. Like any good Christian wife, says, I'll go wherever my husband will go. And then as us children, we were taught oyakoko, fidelity to your parents. He says, okay, if you're going, Mom, we're going.
Okay, so this is a huge shift. So your father decided to segregate, to go back to Japan. Your mother said, we should stay together as a family. So all of a sudden, from your perspective, you were thinking you would leave camp to go back into U.S. society. From that thinking, you now shifted just quickly to thinking now you can go to Japan.
Yeah.
So what were you thinking when this was happening?
Shocked. I'm really shocked. Especially when you had to go tell your friends that we're going to Japan. Your whole frame of mind is, I'm going to go to Japan. I mean, outside. I'm going to work. I'm going to get a job as a houseboy. I'm going to do something to help the family out, And you're saying, I'm going to go out. And your principals and teachers are saying, you're going to go out. And then all of a sudden, we became disloyal. We were tabbed with being disloyal. As being one of the no-no boys, if you want to, for that matter. And so it was a shock, a tremendous shock. My brother and I couldn't understand. We just, And then we had to shift our way of thinking. We had to shift our friends. Now the lawyers are saying, they don't want to associate with us. So you start thinking of people that.
Because up to this point, you associate more with the loyals, and then there was, and then you had the ones who
we looked at the disloyals as, But then all of a sudden, we became one. But it was a terrible shock.
Now, did you and your brother, did you ever feel resentment toward your father for making this decision?
No, not at that time. No, we felt that we should be going with the family. I think the family was more important to us. We were taught that way, family. That's the Bushido way, family. So as a result, we went along with it.
Now your brother was a little bit older, so he was probably old enough that he could probably have stayed.
Yes.
Because he was.
Yes.
Yes. Was he ever enticed to probably stay, or did he also think that he just needed to go with the family?
He felt the same way. He says, because by then, our uncles and whatnot, they're writing letters and telling Mom, hey, this is what they were planning for us. Later on, I found out that they already knew that it was approved.
Oh, that it was approved for them to leave Grenada?
For us to leave. It was approved.
To transfer out of Topaz to Grenada.
Approved. This is what I found out later through my research.
Oh, so it was just like the inefficiencies of the government to...
Not inefficiency, I think it was...
There's some...
See what happened? First of all, what the policy was, you go to what they call the regional WRA, and you put the application in, and the two camps have to agree for the exchange. All right, Topaz agreed, Grenada agreed. In fact, Grenada says, hey, we're expecting them. When are they going to leave? So we were that close to leaving. That's how close we were. And something triggered it. And of course, I could speculate as to what did it. But either one, the Topaz project manager knew that the questionnaires were coming, prior briefing on that, or he received that unfavorable information, the informant report, or because they became, maybe the U.S. Army, because of the FBI report, provided them the intelligence report, but for some reason or another, it was stopped. And so we didn't know that.
Wait, who knows for what reason? It's just something that might have been just one person stopping it, just changed the whole life of...
Look, if you look at the FBI, the kind of hearsay and just so-called derogatory remarks about somebody.
Yeah.
They are so flimsy and so unsubstantiated that they're meaningless, and yet one little thing can do it.
And you know, like you say, surprised they released them, but they did. I think they released them for a reason, to quell the community and make sure that they understand it.
No, I don't know that they are so.
I don't know. I really don't know.
How did your
because other school teachers were picked up.
Sure, and held.
Held, so I don't know.